right. Well, first of all, I want to thank Benny and Alex for this amazing event and inviting me. And also the other incredible renegades and performers and presenters. It's so eclectic. I love it. It's so original. And yeah, it's an honor to be here. Thank you. So as my talk, the title is The Matrix Control System, The Path Towards Awakening. We're going to go a little bit deeper. Right, a bit more esoteric, a bit more fringe, a bit more darker maybe, but we'll come out the light. So bear with me. A lot of this stuff I will talk, maybe some of you are already aware. For some of others of you, maybe completely new information, may sound like sci-fi and, you know, way out of your belief system, so to speak. And I really, as a disclaimer, I don't expect for anyone to believe anything I say. Please do your own research, do your own work. My work is based on, roughly 20 years when I took the red pill, based on basically just my own suffering and trying to figure out what's going on with me in the world and dealing with depression and just tumbling down the rabbit hole. And my work, people who are familiar with my work on my blog, Piercing the Veil of Reality, veilofreality.com, know that, I combine my own personal struggle and work and experiences with research into bigger topics. And seeking truth is for me a process. It's not like you arrive at one thing, you always change, also based on your own inner development. So for me, early on, seeking truth was always a twofold process. It's not just externally understanding intellectually what's going on based on information, the head-centric, but most importantly also the inner work, right? So you raise your level of being to kind of perceive or get into deeper, higher levels of knowledge. So, both of these topics are pretty big, and it's what I want to give is just a rough overview, right? And there's way more on my website for you guys to check out and other resources you can look into it for yourself. So, when we talk about the matrix control system, what is really the matrix control system, right? We see it on the outer level, right, on the physical level, so to speak, which we're all familiar with, which other people already have talked about, on the government level, government statism, corporations, the pharmaceutical industries, banking, military, police, and all of that, which I basically consider the superficial 3D physical level. And I also summarize it as official culture, things we've been indoctrinated with and taught or, mind controlled with since birth, basically, a certain version of reality that goes against the truth. Then, for many of us who go a bit deeper and do more research, we come to a deeper 3D level, as I call it, and we tap into something called the Illuminati, secret societies, and shadow government, and really the forces that are truly in control behind the government, behind the public figures, right? And that ties into mind control projects, secret government projects like MKUltra, and geoengineering, obviously, chemtrails, also ties into the UFO phenomenon, which is a whole topic on its own. And I can't really get much into that, but my good friend Umberto and we did a documentary called UFOs, Aliens and the Question of Contact, which you can find on my website. And I tie artificial intelligence, transhumanism into the deeper level because although it's already open out there in the mainstream and we've been prepped for, the technology that's out there has been around for decades. What we see only on the official level is just doesn't even come close to the technology that's already out there in shadow, black budget projects and whatnot. So, that is what we see on the world stage, right? That 3D level of the matrix. But what I really want to go into in this talk and tie into deeper levels of control is the matrix control system on a hyperdimensional level, non-physical level, right? Throughout the ages, there's a lot of information, and many different ancient esoteric teachings have talked about a certain force, something that keeps humanity trapped, right? Which is exists outside our five sensory perception, so we cannot perceive it, right? And influences in ways we're not really aware of. And a lot of this knowledge has been suppressed and corrupted and distorted over thousands of years for obvious reasons, right? So I want to list some of the teachings or sources that talk about this so-called hyperdimensional non-physical matrix. So basically we're talking about lower astral entities, demonic entities, right? And you see it in the Gnostic tradition, they called it the archons. Or in the jinn and the Arabian mythology, Shaitans and Sufism, and with the UFO phenomenon, it's the reptilians and greys. And just in a nutshell, the UFO phenomena is not too much a nuts and bolts scenario with physical aliens, with physical UFOs or spaceships coming from physical planets, kind of like a Hollywood Star Trek scenario, which we've also been kind of conditioned with. But it is also a paraphysical phenomena with these ships and entities kind of popping in and out of 3D reality, and they can adjust to our belief system. So there's a lot of deception and a lot of disinformation in the UFO field around that as well. Then very profound work by Sri Aurobindo in his work of integral yoga, which just goes really deep into the esoteric teachings of yoga. He called them the occult hostile forces. Occult simply meaning hidden, right? It doesn't mean evil. In esoteric Christianity, a very profound trilogy by Boris Moraviev called Gnosis, which is based on the true esoteric Christian teachings way before the church corrupted it and turned it into a dogma to this external authoritarian God or whatever that judges over us. He called it the general law that resides over humanity and keeps us asleep and works through us, and really also acts on anyone who's trying to wake up. Then anybody who's familiar with Carlos Castaneda's work on Don Juan, talking about the predator who came out of space, taking over humans' lives. And in Gurdjieff's work, also Gurdjieff, I don't know if you guys are familiar with him, profound mystic. His work is kind of combines Sufism with Egyptian mystery schools and also esoteric Christian teachings. He called it the evil magician that has hypnotized humanity and kind of keeps the flock together with an invisible fence. And of course, in Native American spirituality, Wetiko, that alien virus that has taken over human minds and works through us. And there's an incredible book out there by Paul Levy, which I can highly recommend. It's called Wetiko, Dispelling the Curse of Evil. And then in Hermeticism, you have the Lords of Destiny. Right, so all of these different sources and teachings for thousands of years have talking about the same phenomenon as in their own allegories, metaphors, words, or culture, but really talked about this hidden force that keeps humanity entrapped in our five sensory frequency prison. And the quote-unquote problem with this phenomena is, like I said, exists outside our five sensory perception, so it's really hard to prove scientifically, especially our modern science and whatnot, right? And it's also very hard for the mind or the logical mind to grasp, because it also ties into the deeper inner esoteric work. And Sri Aurobindo in Integral Yoga talks about the necessity to develop high sensory perception, through your inner work, so you can perceive these forces directly. So, to kind of summarize these three different levels, I made this graphic with the tree. Right, you see the physical matrix on the outside branches, the superficial matrix we're all aware of: government, statism, corporations, banking, finance, military, culture, education, and so on. Religion, obviously. And you go a bit deeper, and you have the deeper levels, like the Illuminati, shadow government, secret societies, secret space program, geoengineering, and so on. And there are many more that relate to all that. However, the root, the ground of this whole matrix setup is the hyperdimensional matrix, right? That works through the human puppets, through these institutions to carry out their agenda. And but we are like tricked, basically, like Plato's allegory of the cave with the shadows on the wall, distracted from who are the real architects and engineers of the matrix. Well, you may ask now, what is their agenda? What is the whole meaning of, or what of these hyperdimensional overlords, right? What is their goal? Right, on the physical matrix, we see maybe on the government level all these psychopaths and forces we are aware of on the visible level. They're driven by greed and power and all of that. But on a deeper level, it really comes down and, to make the bold statement and really just there are many other sources that talk about this, and you guys, as I said, can research it for yourself. But what it comes down to is that we as human beings have been genetically manipulated and partially created by quote-unquote alien forces over hundreds and thousands of years, right? Cut off from our original genetic blueprint, lowered our consciousness, and keeping us in this frequency prison, five sensory frequency prison based on ego consciousness, on survival, security, right? And it's all about divide and conquer, fighting each other. And you can see it even in the Bible. The allegory of the fall from Eden is basically the fall from our original state of our full human potential, full activated DNA. Science even talks about so-called junk DNA, which doesn't make sense. Why would there be junk in our DNA, right? But what it really comes down to is that the aim or the reason to keep us in this frequency prison is they farm us for our soul energy. They use us as food source. Humanity, to really be that bluntly, is not on top of the food chain, right? We think we have no predators. We think we are the predators to all other species, but there's a whole other force that feeds off of our energy. And the reason they keep us on the lower frequency is because they feed off of a certain frequency, a negative frequency of suffering, of all kinds of negative emotions, of sexual pathologies, and chaos, wars, and all of that, which they initiate through the human puppets, right? All the wars you see in the world, when we see on the surface level, initiated by psychopaths or Zionists or Illuminati, Jesuits, Rothschilds, Rockefellers, all of them are also actually puppets to these hyperdimensional forces. And psychopaths are fully occupied by these entities. So psychopaths have basically empty shells, which are being used by these entities to carry out their agenda, with the only purpose to create that frequency, right? So we are being really literally farmed as a for this food source. So on the higher levels there may be some direct involvement of where these controllers on the 3D level. I have direct contact with some of these alien forces, but most of them have no idea what their true agenda is. They're also compartmentalized. You have the pyramid we all seen, of the control system, and we see the Illuminati on top, but that's really just on the physical level. There's a much higher hierarchy that goes up into the hyperdimensional non-physical realm. Now, everything we see on our planet that's happening right now, which others have talked about as well, which we see right now with chemtrails, vaccination, GMOs, fluoride in the water, right? EMF radiation, Wi-Fi, all of that. And it's really designed to keep us in this lower frequency, to keep us from awakening, to keep us from activating our DNA, our original blueprint, right? And it also, especially in this day and age of the technologies, keeps us in our heads, head-centric, away from our body intelligence, because our body is really the instrument for ascension. And that's really key in the awakening process, which I'll go on a bit later. So ironically, we are GMOs. We are genetically modified organisms. And in ways we have no idea of and are not aware of, because this has been going on for so long, so it has become normalized. And really the name of the game is also that pathology has become normalized. As Krishnamurti said, it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. So, in the Native American spirituality, they talk about the Wetiko virus, right, that works through humans, and that's really how it works in ways we're not aware of, not only through the outer forces, but also through ourselves. We have no true understanding until we go into deeper esoteric work. So here's another matrix analogy, as if there hasn't been enough of that already. But the film The Matrix, besides the obvious ideas shown in that film, also provide deep esoteric truths. For example, when Neo wakes up, pulls up his tubes and sees these feeding fields of humans being bred in these tubes to be used as energy source or food source for the machines. It's a great allegory of the hyperdimensional matrix control system. You see also Neo, this disillusionment, right, which happens when he becomes face-to-face with the horror of the situation, as Gurdjieff also talked about. So I want to read 3 different quotes from 3 amazing renegades and awakened beings. All quotes are from the early 20th century. The first one is from Rudolf Steiner. There are beings in the spiritual realms for whom anxiety and fear emanating from human beings offer welcome food. When humans have no anxiety and fear, then these creatures starve. People not yet sufficiently convinced of this statement could understand it to be meant comparatively only. But for those who are familiar with this phenomenon, it is a reality. If fear and anxiety radiates from people and they break out in panic, then these creatures find welcome nutrition and they become more and more powerful. These beings are hostile toward humanity. Everything that feeds on negative feeling, on anxiety, fear, and superstition, despair or doubt, are in reality hostile forces in supersensible worlds, launching cruel attacks on human beings while they are being fed. Therefore, it is above all necessary to begin with that the person who enters the spiritual world overcomes fear, feelings of helplessness, despair, and anxiety. But these are exactly the feelings that belong to contemporary culture and materialism, because it estranges people from the spiritual world. It is specially suited to evoke hopelessness and fear of the unknown in people, thereby calling up the above-mentioned hostile forces against them. So what Steiner says at the end is really shows again the whole setup of the matrix when we're being preoccupied with life in this fear-based matrix. That's really the matrix, what is based on this fear frequency of survival and preoccupation, making a living and all of this, and competition and fighting each other, and the anxiety and the panic and that comes with it. And on that note, what I do actually for a living, I'm a body worker, energy worker. I do holistic coaching for 15 years. And what I see of most people are constantly in fight and flight. They don't even know it. Constantly anxiety, right? And it has become so normalized, that stress, that, and then there are the coping mechanisms, addiction, all of that. But that's really the setup of the matrix to get that, frequency food source. So the next quote is from Gurdjieff from the book In Search of the Miraculous. There are 1,000 things which prevent a man from awakening, which keep him in the power of his dreams. In order to act consciously with the intention of awakening, it is necessary to know the nature of the forces which keep man in a state of sleep. First of all, it must be realized that the sleep in which man exists is not normal but hypnotic sleep. Man is hypnotized, and this hypnotic state is continually maintained and strengthened in him. One would think that there are forces for whom it is useful and profitable to keep man in a hypnotic sleep or state and prevent him from seeing the truth and understanding his position. So in light of what we explored, where it's very clear what he's hinting at. But also understanding this idea of hypnotic sleep. When somebody is hypnotized, that person doesn't know that he or she is hypnotized. So also when we talk about awakening, for anybody who wants to awaken, we need to also acknowledge how we are asleep. Right? Even if you're aware on some level, on the intellectual level, mind level, how the matrix works, it requires a lot of humility and a radical self-honesty to really admit our own sleeping state. In the ways we may be asleep and manipulated, we have really no awareness of. Which then Sri Aurobindo from Integral Yoga talks about in the section, The Hidden Forces of Life. Men are being constantly invaded by the hostiles, occult forces, as he calls them. And there are great numbers of men who are partly or entirely under their influence. Some are possessed by them, others are incarnations of hostile beings, which basically most of the psychopathic world leaders. At the present moment, they are very active all over the earth. Of course, in the outside world, where there is no consciousness such as developed in yoga, and by the way, yoga and his work is not just the physical practice of yoga, there's a whole deep esoteric practice behind that, by which they can either become aware of or consciously repel the attacks. The struggle in them between the psychic, which is his expression for the soul, and the hostile forces goes on mostly behind the veil, or so far it is on the surface, is not understood by the mind. The apparent freedom and self-assertion of our personal being, to which we are so profoundly attached, conceal a most pitiable subjection to 1,000 suggestions, impulsions, forces, which we have made extraneous to your little person. Our ego, boasting of freedom, is at every moment the slave, toy, and puppets of countless beings, forces, and powers, influences in universal nature. All life is the play of universal forces. The individual gives a personal form to these universal forces. But he can choose whether he shall respond or not to the action of a particular force, Only most people do not really choose. They indulge the play of the forces. Your illnesses, depressions, etc. are the repeated play of such forces. It is only when one can make oneself free of them that one can be able to be a true person, have a true life. But one can be free only by living in the divine. So that sounds all very scary, and what the hell is going on? Invisible forces invading us and all of that. But he, at the end of this quote, shows us the way out. One can only be free by living in the divine. And what does it really mean to be living in the divine? Well, we go then into this topic to what does it truly mean to be awake? And in this day and age, as more and more people, quote unquote, are awakening as we see it and become more aware, I've also seen that the word awake is being very misused and misinterpreted in so many ways, just like the word love is being abused and misused for all kinds of things that are not love. Right? So when we talk about what does it truly mean to be awake, right? I mean, I feel like awakening, just truth-seeking, is a process, right? You're not like, I'm awake. I don't claim to be awake. There's, in the absolute sense of the true meaning of the word, right? There are different stages. You can be awake on a superficial level, on an intellectual level, in terms of how the matrix works. You see through government status and false flags and all the corruption and lies, and that's fine and good. Even on a deeper level, secret societies and whatnot. Or you can even be intellectually aware on the mind level of the hyperdimensional matrix. But from an esoteric perspective of the awakening process, it can hardly be called having taken the red pill, because that's a whole different story to really rise up to a higher level and make a conscious connection to the divine, because we're talking about enlightenment, right? The death of the ego personality of who you think you are, the I, and you become a conscious instrument of the divine and fully in alignment with the Tao, as they say in Zen. But when we talk about what the true awakening state is, or enlightenment state is, we obviously come into problems with language. As Lao Tzu said, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao, right? Language, it's at some point in the awakening process, especially on an interpersonal or inner level, when you reach a higher state, there's certain states of being and experiences you cannot simply put into words. But that's why you also see in the ancient teachings, esoteric teachings, that work with metaphors, allegories, symbolisms, to kind of, like the saying goes, to point a finger at the moon. But many people mistake the finger for the moon and take things in literal and all of that. However, as Suzuki said, to point at the moon, a finger is needed, but woe to those who take the finger for the moon. So let's do a little bit finger pointing, trying to describe the undescribable. In more practical terms, like I said, in terms of the awakening process, understanding the external matrix or control system is very much needed, right? However, what I see in this day and age, especially in the so-called truth movement and people waking up glued to the internet, screen and taking all in this information, which you also need to learn basic critical thinking to dissect lies from truth, because there's a lot of disinformation in the alternative media as well, which we must not forget. It's not just the mainstream media, right? So if you don't have your critical thinking skills down on that level, you can also, unintentionally actually spread disinformation or confuse yourself even more. But the key really in the deeper awakening process is the process of embodiment. And embodiment, as the word just implies, means also on a basic level to get more into your body. So what Carrie said at the beginning of this event, it's really like we can get so stressed out with all this information, creating more anxiety and fear and producing that luge for other forces to feed off. We need to kind of get ourselves grounded, right? We need to get into our bodies, especially with conscious body practices, speed yoga. I love qigong, conscious dance, walking out in nature and just meditating and just, getting away from the technological gadgets. However, it is more than just getting in touch with your body. This is absolutely needed. But embodiment, when we look at the root word, it means in a reference to a soul or spirit invested with a physical form. And the synonym for embodiment are incarnation, avatar, a manifestation. And as we know, incarnation is a person who embodies spirit in the flesh. So embodiment from the spiritual esoteric perspective means actually the full soul growth, to grow your soul, to bring your soul up to the front, or as Sri Aurobindo said, the psychic being, the soul to the front and the personality to the back. So the personality becomes a pure expression of essence. All right. Like when we're born, a lot of people, some people claim when babies are born that they are fully enlightened, fully awake. This is not so. I mean, we're all born with the soul in embryo, as Gurdjieff said, right? And we need to engage in conscious esoteric work or conscious evolution to grow our soul, to grow our astral bodies, which also basically results in activating our DNA and our reconnect to original genetic blueprint. But in our society, as we all know, as we grow up, our soul potential is being pushed back, and we're being like, our personality is formed with education, mind control. Like we are being told what to think, not how to think, right? And media and all of that, and our parents, nobody had perfect parents, right? And they just you cannot blame your parents either, because they are damaged and programmed, and round it goes, right? So essence being pushed back and more, and what is created is this false I, this false personality, which we then mistake as our true self. If you tell people, that they don't know themselves, like, I know myself, I know who I am, right? But most often people refer to that as actually their conditioned self they're not aware of, and have desires and needs they're not even their own, right? They come from matrix programming, what it means to have success, or desires based on wounding and trauma and insecurity to fill a hole in their lives. So that just keeps us within that matrix construct, right? And just creates more suffering. So embodiment from that spiritual esoteric perspective is the process of soul integration and growth, connecting to one's higher self, or the soul, and becoming a conscious vessel for spirit divine to work through. And it relates ultimately to the alchemical marriage of the inner male and female. So on that note, I want to mention, when we talk about the divine, also the word God comes up, right? And we all get triggered by the word God. Many of us maybe, right? Understandably, because dogmatic religion has completely corrupted it, put this authoritarian person in the sky that judges over us, right? So, but it's also by design, and then a lot of people become atheists, right? And completely don't want to hear about divine and God, and like, what do you mean aligning to something higher? I just want to be myself and me, and just be sovereign and independent and all these things, right? But that's a trap in itself as well, right? Because there's a higher force, a divine force, and you can enter that, and that is actually also aligns you with your true, deeper soul purpose and soul talents and lessons that are unique to you. So it's a highly individual process. So I want to talk more about individuality and sovereignty and being, and what that actually means. Individuality, in that sense, is not what we know from our official culture, this like cult of personality thing, right? But individuality from the esoteric perspective is the embodied, individualized soul as a conscious transducer for higher energies, being the instrument for divine will. Well, individuality does not mean ego or personality identification, the false I, which we've been programmed with, or what the matrix official culture promotes as individuality, right? Which is, we know, most often the cult of personality. Now, sovereignty. We all know, but we don't like government to tell us what to do. We see the lies of statism and all of that, and we want to be sovereign human beings. But what does it really mean to be sovereign, right? It goes way beyond just not having subjected to physical or 3D authority, but also to be sovereign and really have true free will without our own mechanical, conditioned behaviors and reactions we are kind of slave to and are not even aware of, right? So again, from this deeper spiritual or esoteric perspective, a sovereign embodied individual is grounded in a deep recognition of the interrelationship of life, right? It means it's not independent. It can be, because everything is connected, fully tuned into the nature and the divine spirit as an individualized but not separate expression of it, a fractal aspect of the universal hologram, It stems from the feminine aspect of consciousness, which is grounded in being. And again, a lot of these teachings talk about levels of being, and Gurdjieffs have talked about that means your level of embodiment, meaning how much you have individualized your soul, brought your soul to the forefront, and the ego and your personality behind, right? So that process, awakening process, or truth seeking, or the awakening process, is a highly individual process, which we need to, it's really important to understand. We are over 7 billion people on this planet, with vast different levels of being, of embodiment, with vast different levels of soul lessons, talents, karma, all kinds of stuff, past lives come in. Things come into play our mind cannot even fully comprehend, right? I mean, there's even a lot of misperception also, because one of the biggest assumptions people make, just because we all look the same, we are the same, and we project our soul potential onto others, right? There are, even the lead, there are psychopaths, right, who have basically empty shells, who cannot possibly wake up, who have no potential for that, and are completely cut off. Not fully, but they are just, not on the level of being as even an average person. Then another deeper topic, which I, cannot get into here, about the idea of soulless beings. That beings who are born here have not a fully individualized soul, and they're not able to activate the higher chakras. They only exist on the first 3 physical ego chakras, and that's fine. It's where they're at, right? It's what they need to experience. So there won't be a collective awakening anytime soon. And as long as we think humanity needs to awaken as a whole, the matrix has us. It's also installed by this whole forces. You have to understand these archonic forces have not only manipulated on a genetic level, but infused us with beliefs and ideas and distorted spiritual teachings, right? Especially in the New Age. So there are vast different levels of being and soul lessons, right? So the path towards awakening is very different for each. And I see this, I worked with one-on-one people for the past 15 years. And what I've noticed, what works for one person may not work for another, right? You cannot, certain person is just not ready for certain information. It's actually, from an esoteric perspective, an infringement of free will to push information on somebody who doesn't ask for it. Right? And who are we to judge what another person's soul lesson is, right? So we need to check ourselves and, be more mindful in that sense. This is a quote from the mother who was Sri Aurobindo's partner from Integral Yoga. Individualization is the capacity to take up all experiences and organize them around the divine center. The aim of the psychic being, soul, is to form an individual being, individualized, personalized around the divine center, which means growing the soul to become fully embodied in one's being. Hence, each individual is a special manifestation in the universe. Therefore, the true path must be an absolutely unique path. And that's really important to keep in mind, right? I mean, we all have well-meaning intention. We want everybody to wake the fuck up, right? And get on with the program. But there's something higher at work here, the divine will, the higher force, the force of nature, which actually overrides all our own little personal will. And we need to align this personal will with this higher will, right? Which is also actually the true secret behind reality creation, right? And manifestation, not a distorted New Age idea that, how you create your own reality based on whatever thoughts and emotions you have. There's a whole deep esoteric path behind it, where the more you are aligned, you receive exactly that which is necessary for your personal soul evolution, which means you don't always get what you think you want, which may be based on conditioned desires and based on wounds you didn't know you have, but it also entails challenges, where you're not being bailed out or helped, but you need to learn the lesson yourself to grow up, to become adults from a spiritual perspective. But all this process, and again I'm giving just a rough overview here, ties into what I've said before. The embodiment process ties into the alchemical inner marriage of the inner male and female, and that has nothing to do with gender, right? So to just describe that in a nutshell, the male aspect of consciousness is what we are caught in right now. It resides in the head, it's up here, right? It's based on willful doing. It's based on fragmentizing, of analyzing, defining. It cannot perceive wholeness. It is caught in the future or in the past, right? And it's cut off from the body. The feminine aspect of consciousness resides in the body, right? It is our it's a sensory instrument, and especially down here, the dantian, the gut, the pelvic floor, our intuitive guidance, which is connected to the wholeness of nature, to our wholeness within, to the divine, which perceives nature. It's grounded in being in the present moment, right? It sees how everything works together, and we receive this guidance if we can tune into it, from this gut level knowing. And many people say we live in the patriarchy. That's partially true, but we actually live more in the patrifocal society, where humanity, especially the Western world, is caught up in the male aspect of consciousness, including women, right? All this just thinking and analyzing and making decisions from the head, and pro and con, or should and shouldn't, and bring solutions to problems, even though we don't know what problem it really is on a deeper level. So we bring fragmentized solutions to a fragmented world because we see it from the head, and create more problems. It's just a never-ending cycle. But going back from the matrix control system, that's also, they keep us head-centric, especially with the technology in this day and age, right? It's kind of a paradox. It helps us to connect more, to get more information, but also keeps us more in our heads, especially with smartphones. How many of us have a hard time just kind of stop looking at this thing, So I don't want to be clear. I don't want to demonize the male aspect of consciousness. The point is to connect it to the feminine. It needs to surrender to the feminine aspect grounded in being. Because also when we're caught up here, as masses of people are caught up in the male aspect of consciousness, they have lost their own internal guidance, their connection to the divine, connection to nature, and hence the rise of authoritarianism, to look for saviors, leaders, solution outside, right? If we are connected down to here, boom, we know what's good for us, right? So you see, for example, the alchemical marriage of the inner male and female depicted in The Hero's Journey, based on Joseph Campbell's work, right? When the hero, see it based, a lot of movies are based on that. He fights the dragons, the enemies, within and without, and he rescues the princess, the bride, right? And they marry, and basically that's an analogy for that inner marriage of freeing the divine feminine and uniting with the male. And then you come from a place of being, and you respond rather than react, and then the male can do, right? It's being and then first doing. Okay. Again, there's way more to be said about that part. I want to read the next quote again from Sri Aurobindo, which talks more about this divine feminine and male marriage from his perspective. Behind this petty instrumental action of the human will, there's something vast and powerful and eternal that oversees the trend of the inclination and presses on the turn of the will. There's a total truth in nature greater than our individual choice. This apparently self-acting mechanism of nature conceals an immanent divine will that compels and guides it and shapes its purposes. But you cannot feel or know that will while you're shut up in your narrow cell of personality, blinded and chained to your viewpoint of the ego and its desires, which basically he talks about the male aspect of consciousness up here, right? The ego identification. For you can wholly respond to it only when you're impersonalized, embodied, by knowledge and widened to see all things in the self and in God, and the self and God in all things, with no separation. Again, that's like the divine feminine, right? This wholeness, the interrelationship of it all. The state of ignorance in which you believe that you are the doer of your acts persists as long as it is necessary for your development. But as soon as you're capable of passing into a higher condition, you begin to see that you're an instrument of the one consciousness. You take a step upward and you rise to a higher conscious level. And that state of being is an direct experience. It's not something I can understand intellectually. That's where the mind and even logic and the head and rational thinking has its limitations, right? I'm not saying it's bad, but it has its limitations in terms of the awakening process, right? We're going to a higher level where we then tap into gnosis, direct experience, higher knowledge, which you cannot read about. You can understand it intellectually, but it's not embodied knowledge. You don't live it. So how does it look like, that more awakened state, right? In our personal lives, how would this, manifest and show itself in everyday life? Well, as I said, I'm certainly not in that state. I mean, the more I'm even in my own process, the more I realize how actually mechanical I am in certain ways, how I'm still lying to myself in certain ways, how I have to really show radical self-honesty, how I try to avoid certain things, engage in spiritual bypassing and all of that. But I see definitely in my own life, having gone through a lot of work, doing a lot of shadow work, and definitely a lot of meditation, and spending time in nature and qigong and yoga, then I'm tapping also more and more into a state of being in the flow I cannot even really put into words, right? And I see this, other friends and people have shared this with me, and some clients I work with have experienced this more and more, and that's what I see happening in terms of that awakening. So here's some pointers how this may look like. Ambition, vital desires based on wounds and conditioning, vanity, the need to be liked or desired, the notion and pressure to become something or someone, any comparison, competition with others and resulting judgments, or even dislike of others, all fall slowly away as to any triggers and reactive behaviors. Why? Because your happiness doesn't depend on anything out there anymore. You have a direct link to your own source, right? A deep and embodied sense of peace and trust, of faith and being taken care of, as in trusting the flow of life, knowing that any challenge that will come up serves as a deeper lesson for the purpose of a true awakening, which is also transcending or getting away from the trap of victim and blame consciousness. It's the end of fear and blame, the death of ego identification, the rebirth of the real I am, embodied spirit, expressing itself uniquely through you. Willful doing dissipates to be replaced by an embodied responding to what is and what life brings, that is uniquely tuned to our soul lessons and talents. It guides us from an embodied inner place without expectations or attachments to outcome. Goal setting and ambition are replaced by quiet aspiration with intentions, but without expectations or need to control. That's what I feel in my life. I don't have any goals anymore. I don't have ambitions. It's hard for me to really make plans to find the future. Also, so I learned most often the hard way, everything that happened in my life and the work I'm doing now, I never really planned. It's not I made a decision to do this, right? It was just like there was something guiding me or pushing and pulling me, sometimes me very resistingly, and learning it the hard way and kind of aligning me with something else that kind of guides me. And then if you really let go and engage or trust the flow of life and engage in the Tao, then life truly becomes more effortless, right? And you don't avoid challenges and you don't avoid life anymore, because life becomes your teacher, right? And you kind of tune into nature and you read symbolisms, because God and divine helping forces are constantly talking to you and wanting to help you and guide you, if you can perceive it. But as Sri Aurobindo said, as long as you're caught up here in the ego personality with your, I want this, I don't like this, you're never going to get it, and you make it harder on yourself. So making choices and decisions don't stem from a thought process anymore, any head-centric analysis or should or shouldn't, but emerge from a gut level of nonverbal intuitive knowing. That's where I find myself more and more as well. I'm like, I don't make decisions out of my head anymore. In fact, if I see myself being in my head and thoughts come up, should I do this or that, pro and con, I know I'm not aligned. I'm not, something is fragmented, I don't make no decision from that state. I become quiet, right? I don't act out of desperation or all of that. I go inside and really then respond from this non-verbal voice, right? And then life truly becomes like a dance in the river of life, as we don't fight the current anymore, being in the zone, locked in the rhythm of life, Tao, aligned with divine will. And that is divine will. It's also then we are really then guided to our true soul desires, which are very different than ego personality desires. It's something that really gives you such a deep passion that doesn't depend on any monetary gains, doesn't depend on if people like it or not, or if you like them or not. It's just, like Joseph Campbell said, it's follow that bliss. And that is really also then your unique soul talent and can align you with your soul purpose and vocation in life. So to summarize all of that, to be in flow and in tune with the Tao, the river of life, is to be in alignment with divine will. It is based on the alchemical marriage of the inner male and female, the embodied soul tuned into and informed by nature in the present moment via its sensory instrument of source consciousness, the body, grounded in the being out of which conscious doing arises. Again, first being, the feminine, the male needs to surrender to the feminine, and then doing, and using the body as the, instrument for ascension. That is really key, in this whole awakening process, which will also, to activate our DNA, and really and that has profound effects on outer reality as we become frequency anchors. However, the path is not that easy, especially in the beginning. And when I talk, it's not about especially I have to say the New Age has distorted it. It's not like just thinking positive thoughts and raising your frequency, being smiley and all of that. Shadow work is the name of the game, right? In order to infuse ourselves, the body, with the divine love, with this higher frequency, we need to clear the vessel of anything that's not in alignment and in that frequency. And that means to not avoid anything. Don't suppress it, because that really just increases the shadow, and that can later on actually manifest in illness and all kinds of other things. But what it means is to love what arises without judgment, to, when you have any discomfort and negative feeling, to fully feel it. That's how you transmute it. That's how you activate the alchemical inner fire. If you have any anger, shame, guilt, sadness, whatever, feel it. Don't escape it. Don't avoid it, right? Most often, all of us have our, avoidance techniques, little addictions where we avoid dealing with, negative emotions and all of that. But the only way out is truly through. For me personally, when I'm feeling down or something is up, I feel sadness or anger coming up, I sit with it, I feel my body, I go deeper into it to really, feel it, right? Without any avoidance. And then sometimes the release comes, I cry, or some other emotion comes underneath it, even more anger, and just, it resolves itself. But the more we do that, the more we clear our vessel, the more we can anchor this higher frequency and be more in alignment. So shadow work is really the name of the game here. Now, there are various traps, or rather obstacles, as well on the path towards awakening. Here, I have written about them a lot, especially my last essay on my blog, The Perilous Path Towards Awakening, which I talk about these ones. I don't have the time to get into all of them here right now, but they entail spiritual bypassing, right? When we use spiritual ideas or spiritual higher truths to avoid our inner work, right? When we escape with philosophy like all is one, all you need is love, and all these, everybody is there where they need to be. And ironically, it's true from a higher perspective, but if we use it to avoid our own shit, so to speak, we bypass our own personal process. The trap of superiority, right? The moment we look down on other people who are not awake, the moment we call them sheeple, right? Show any form of I'm better than somebody else, right? Or the opposite, and if you worship, idolize somebody, we give our power away as well. Right? And on a note, I've fallen into all these traps myself, and still may at some point. Right? It's very natural in this path towards awakening. Big trap, forcefully trying to wake others, and wanting to help others, which sounds completely counterintuitive and Bernhard, what the hell are you saying? But obviously we need to help others, but what I'm talking about ties more into also the law of free will, right? You cannot wake up others who don't ask for it. You infringe into their free will, and most often people have to learn the hard way. Now, if you look at your own awakening process, I doubt that anybody has kind of forced you, dropped knowledge bombs in you and kind of screamed at you, and then okay, get it now. It's through your own experiences, most often, in my case, through my own suffering, right? In my early 20s, I came to the US, And I was dealing with intense despair, depression, suicidal thoughts, and all of that. And I was crying in bed. And one day I woke up and I need to figure myself out. What the hell is going on? I don't know what this world is about. And that triggered my awakening, right? So most often people don't wake up until they suffer, and then there's also their own soul path on a level we are not really aware of, and we have no judgment around this. With regards to wanting to help others, you cannot help others who are not willing to help themselves. And I see this in my private practice all the time. I do work with people, but so many people want to be healed by somebody else, to do the work for somebody else, and that's not what I do, right? It's not a magic pill, right? Just like, by the way, medicine plants are no magic pill. Ayahuasca and all these things can open the process, and there's a whole other side, the dark side to the whole medicine plant work, which I don't want to get into here, but that can also be used as a spiritual bypass. Right? It initiates a process, and it's the beginning of something, but ultimately we need to engage in that work sincerely within ourselves, and also then tap into our healing potential. For me in my healing work, when I work on people, I don't heal people. What I tap into is in the body intelligence of everybody I work on, and initiate their healing process, and they need to take responsibility for it. So again, we cannot help others who are not willing to help themselves. Right? Then the trap of meaninglessness, when we, the world is so fucked, we kind of get lost, trapped in a disillusionment, in this negative frequency, and there's nothing we can do anyway. We get pissed off at the world, fuck everything, and that just works for the matrix overlords. They want exactly that frequency. That's what they feed off of. Avoidance of everyday responsibilities, right? If we develop a spiritual ego, like, I'm too spiritual to have this job or this job, and then leech off of others, right? Kind of like, because of this, again, superiority, because you think you're so awake and whatnot. But the two bigger traps are victim and blame consciousness and savior martyr consciousness, right? Which also keeps us trapped in the matrix. However, so all of these traps are way more explored in depth on my blog, which you can read about, and it's nothing is black and white. It's just really, it's a razor sharp path, right? And we have been under this control and manipulated in ways most of us are not aware of, right? Even on the emotional and physiological and psychological level. But the very big one in light of the hyperdimensional matrix is the trap of the revolutionary mind, or stuck in 3D. As I showed at the beginning with the tree, the physical matrix is really just a symptom of the hyperdimensional matrix, which is the root, which works through the human puppets, right? Anything, be it a Zionist, Jesuits, like I said before, Rockefellers, Rothschilds, they are just puppets to these forces as well, carrying out their agenda. And if we project hate and disgust on these psychopaths as horrible, things they make, we provide exactly that frequency they want. And it's all on divide and conquer. That's how it works on unseen levels, and we get distracted by the shadows on the wall, as in Plato's allegory of the cave, or Don Quixote, hunting the illusory windmills. So this picture is from Los Angeles right after the Trump selection. Liberals getting very pissed off and becoming that which they protested against before. So it's beautiful because their shadow got triggered. It's actually an incredible teaching function which they don't get, and project all their hate and disgust on the Trump puppet and the supporters, and feeding the matrix with that reaction right there, right? Because from this higher perspective, these hyperdimensional forces, they couldn't care less who is in power. They couldn't care less if it's Trump, Hillary, and whatnot. All they want is that frequency. You have to understand, they just want that frequency, divide and conquer of fighting each other. When we identify ourselves, left versus right, anarchist versus statist, and this, that's the name of the game, right? So it's trapped in this duality, basically. So, but on a deeper level, people then still supply this nourishment. Or on the opposite hand, also, when you look at Trump or Bernie Sanders or whoever as the savior, the worship, that kind of stuff also feeds the hyperdimensional matrix and the occult forces, simply because you are disempowering yourself. You look, because you give away your power by looking for salvation outside yourself. So, on that note, I'm not saying It's not black and white. And I'm not pulling the New Age card to just ignore what's going on, not standing up. We still need to stand up and speak truth and point out and say what's going on in the world, but we need to really be mindful of our own reactionary behavior and shadow projection. If there's anger, we project outwardly. For example, who died a few months ago? The Rockefeller guy was 100 years old or something. And I saw on Facebook so many people, and the psychopath down, who like cheering at the death of this man. Anybody who has done that, the Matrix has you. That's how they want you to react, right? And I'm not telling you that to send him love and light like the New Age thing. That's not the issue either, but from this higher perspective, this person called Rockefeller was an empty shell, completely occupied by these so-called demonic forces, to having used his vessel, to the fullest extent and just moved on, right? That's it. This is going to take possession of a next person, but that emotional projection of this hate and anger, or just rejoicing in the death of this guy playing God, right? When we feel like, all the psychopaths need to be killed and we need to get rid of the elite and fight it, you become exactly that, what you fight against, and you try to play God. So Sri Aurobindo, at First World War, really beautifully points out the trap of the revolutionary mind. Look at what happened in 1914, or for that matter, at all that is and has been happening in human history. The eye of the yogin sees not only the outward events and person and causes, but the enormous forces which precipitate them into action. If the men who fought were instruments in the hands of rulers and financiers, these in turn were mere puppets in the clutch of those hidden hyperdimensional forces. When one is habituated to see the things behind, one is no longer prone to be touched by the outward aspects, or to expect any remedy from political, institutional, or social changes. The only way out is through the descent of an embodied consciousness, which is not the puppet of these forces, but is greater than they are. So again, it aligns to this embodiment process, this inner awakening as frequency anchors. It has profound effects on outside reality in ways we cannot even possibly imagine. And it doesn't mean also just to be in the cave and meditate and, again, not that black and white fallacy and just avoid life. It's all about engaging, but, if we just try to fight the matrix on these 3D aspects, we're just playing on their level, in their game, and we're just playing in their hands and getting trapped within that, right? Which ultimately types into this, which also sounds very counterintuitive. Like, what do you mean? We're not supposed to fight evil. Well, when we talk about evil, what is evil, right? When we think of, from a much bigger perspective, the one divine God, whatever you may be it, which everything is, made out of the same stuff, from a high level, it originates from the one and then bilaterally emerges into duality. And that's what we're dealing with on a 3D level, duality. The dark cannot exist without the light, male not of the female, and so on and so forth. The one cannot exist without the other. Hence, evil, what we call the dark side, cannot be get rid of on that level. It cannot. The only way out is to transcend it, right, onto a higher level. And collectively, we're not going to make it as a whole of humanity, but that ties more into like something what I call timeline reality split. There are, many of us who awaken and transcend, but we're trying to get rid of evil, or just forcefully fight evil in that sense. We're also trapped in their game, because what it means that we think God made a mistake, quote unquote. There's some error in creation. However, there's no mistake in creation. Everything what we see, as horrible as it is, has its right to exist. Evil has its free will to exist. Because even from the higher perspective, the divine doesn't judge. The dark side is also just the divine God experiencing itself subjectively, right? And you see it in the yin and yang sign. If you remember the black and the white, and also the white dot and the black dot and the white, it's still, even as dark as you get away from creating, you're still part of it. It's just exploring the dark side, right? And even from a collective level, on a soul level, there are many souls incarnate who are here to experience the dark side of Creator. This is just where they're at and what they need to experience, because from the high level, all there's experience. There's no judgment, right? So when I say, what I mean by the trap of fighting evil is like the futility of trying to get rid of evil on this level. It's not going to happen. So the next excerpt I want to read is a bit longer one from a really fascinating guy named Michael Topper. And he has really produced immense, deeper truths of reality and esoteric material. He was around in the early 90s. He lived actually in Topanga Canyon in Calabasas. And his material was first published in the Matrix books, not the films, the Matrix books, early 90s, published by Val Valerin. And this excerpt is from the positive and negative forces of higher densities, which kind of goes deep into what I was talking about. Let me read it to you. Without duality, there would be no existence to discuss. From the one, there's bilateral emergence. Negative consciousness arises from the self-viewing self at the instant of creation, and it is therefore an integral part of creation. It cannot be separated from it because it exists only because of positive creative inception. Neither can exist without the other. It's that simple. Thus, we see the effort to save the world via punishment of the wicked or conversion to the light or spiritualizing matter with love are all expressions of the fundamental desire to undo creation, to kill God. Through the idea that evil darkness is a rebellion, a fault, a thing to be done away with, the twist is introduced that lays the groundwork for domination and absorption from the hyperdimensional perspective. We have to understand here that the true negative realm is to eat consciousness, right? To do this actually prevents an overt takeover in literal physical terms. If an invasion was detected, this would mean that the veil would be lifted and all would see the man behind the curtain and would be disgusted and turn away. Just in The Wizard of Oz, those ruby slippers have to be obtained very carefully. Gathering the essence, in terms of food supply for these forces, is an art of great subtlety and is in its purest sense stalking. The aim of stalking is to create a completely controlled artificial environment composed of thoroughly predictable human behaviors, made predictable because they have been programmed to respond to cues of conditioning which go back thousands and thousands of years back. And these predictable behaviors are this. That's how people are being, that's exactly how they want us to react. The primary object of negative stalking is to persuade through strongly influenced but not robotic behavior patterns the free choice of the targeted consciousness to align with negative higher density existence, trap of agreement, and that's really the name of the game. Because also based on the law of free will, they need us to engage out of our own, even manipulated free will with their agenda. And that's how the deception really works. It's not that overt, right? And especially if we're then being distracted by the 3D material matrix and don't really know what the forces, how they really work through others and through us, we're being had and kind of get into a so-called trap of agreement. A basic trap of agreement on a very basic level is government, right? Government also basic in archonic alien creation. The moment you vote, you give your permission to be ruled over. Right, that's a very basic trap of agreement right there. The effect of stalking is sort of like stampeding a herd of cattle. Bit by bit, they are consolidated into a negative mode, which consists of the idea of us versus them, right? Divide and conquer. Even though on the surface, it may see that this mode is positive or service to others, i.e. save the world because it's wrong or flawed or blighted with original sin or whatever, the very fact that it is formed in the dominator mode of perceiving salvation outside means that it can more easily be taken over body, mind, and soul at a level that is unseen and unseeable, right? Again, like I said, if you project all your shit out there and look for external solutions, right, that's how you're being had by the matrix, and that's how you're being more manipulated on unseen levels. And he finishes with, in other words, Satan can and most often does appear as angel of light. And that's also a very big topic, especially in the so-called UFO arena in the New Age with all the Galactic Federation of Light nonsense and aliens saving us, and a lot of corrupted channel material, which are most often negative entities posing as positive ones, and in very deceptive ways. Okay, more on that. That may be a bit complex and over your head, but it's, that's really what it comes down to. It's not about trying to save the world, right? It's not trying to fix the world. It's about transcending it and engaging in this embodied inner awakening of anchoring the frequency, which then has incredible effects on outside reality. Now, on a personal level, how are we dealing with these? How do these hyperdimensional occult forces show up in our personal lives? Well, here's the thing: as long as you're plugged into the matrix, or people in the matrix, you'll be for the most part be left alone. In fact, you can have brilliant career, make all the money, fame, everything in matrix terms, and have a beautiful life based on official culture, even being touched by them, because you're not a threat to their agenda. You supply that food source, right? You're just, trapped in ego consciousness. However, the moment you start to wake up, you're going to meet that fella, right? Really, anyone who starts to question, expose the matrix, and engages also in the process of awakening, becomes a prime target of these forces. And the way you see it, it's like Agent Smith in the Matrix. Remember, when Neo started to wake up, and Agent Smith was hunting him, Agent Smith was injecting himself through other people programs trying to get to Neo. And that's a brilliant analogy, which also the esoteric teachings talked about. In esoteric Christianity, general law, this works through other people, where even our own family and our household, our friends and family become our enemies, as it's written, right? And it is out of their conscious awareness. They are being used as portals to try to get to you, right? If they cannot inject through your own minds, they try to stir up others, be it through public attacks, friends and family. And it's the moment you make it personal too and start engaging in interpersonal fighting, the matrix has you too, because then you provide just the loosh, right? That energy, right? So it's really important in the path to never ever take anything personal. Right, like Don Juan said in Castaneda's, you got to get rid of self-importance, right? And also develop more compassion and empathy, because blind people don't know that they are blind and programmed, right? And so there are two ways these occult forces can get to us, and be it through others, and most often through our own minds in ways we are simply not aware of. We all think we have our own thoughts, but we never consider that the thoughts we're having sometimes are actually not our own thoughts, but relate to thought injections coming from the outside. Like Sri Aurobindo in Integral Yoga talks a lot about the path of yoga to develop the discernment, internal guidance from external suggestions on the unseen levels, and how these occult forces literally fuck with our minds. But the key point to understand is that they can only inject where we already have our own blind spots and wounds. Simply a frequency thing, right? That's why shadow work is so important, to heal your shit, to get out of victim and blame consciousness and take full self-responsibility, right? It's much easier to shout out at the world and scream how fucked up it is and this and those psychopaths. Yeah, much easier than really taking full responsibility for everything you feel and not blaming anybody else, and really, burn or ignite that inner alchemical fire to transcend it and heal your stuff. Because all our unresolved issues, shadow aspects within us, are gateways for hyperdimensional interferences and suggestions that influence our behaviors and actions, thought injections and manipulations of emotions, be it through our own minds or working through other people, targeting us in an attempt to interfere with our awakening and feed off of our life force. Again, frequency is the name of the game, right? They only can tag into what we already have not healed, or we all have our one theme or big issue in our life. Everybody, Gurdjieff talked to the chief for the chief issue, right? It keeps repeating itself. Maybe you see in your own life, especially in relationships, same relationship with different people and the same issues, right? And but that's where we're being had. Right? And then if you have more like a savior martyr complex, they enhance that. They kind of augment or enhance the issues we already have, right? To kind of keep us in this lower frequency. So we need to take responsibility for this. And then from its deeper esoteric or spiritual perspective, as Sri Aurobindo and others have talked, and the Mother have talked about as well, these hostile forces or evil forces then also function, serve as a teaching function, meaning that they have their place in terms of the evolution of consciousness, right? They have their part of helping us to evolve, actually. And that's what we must not forget. We're talking about evolution of consciousness, right? So evolution of consciousness happens through friction, right? The dark versus light and igniting the fire to transmute and evolve, right? So it is there for a reason, for that reason. It's just when we don't understand the process or react mechanically and don't engage in this inner process, we're getting caught up in it and don't really, move up, so to speak. So from that perspective, you can then utilize them as teachers, for they make us aware of where our work is required within our inner universe. Even on the interpersonal level, whatever triggers you when you already get upset on Facebook, whatever, by somebody else, if a strong emotional reaction, that shows you exactly where your work is to be done within yourself. And take responsibility with that without trying to attack and defend and get all riled up, right? And, for me in my path, gone, through my own attacks, public attacks, intensely being in hyperdimensional warfare, on the brink on suicide and everything. And but when we sincerely engage in this process, there's the divine help coming as well. Like the call, ask and you shall be given, from this deep esoteric perspective, means that you're not being bailed out, but there are assisting forces. The right teaching, book, person, or whatever may comes around and helps you in the process, but you need to learn the lesson yourself, even if it's fucking tough in the moment. But looking back, all the attacks I've received and interferences were actually necessary initiations. And there's a true meaning also from a shamanic perspective. There's initiation, that death of your personality, that rebirth. And that's a tough process. It can be very painful, but we need to embrace the pain, not to indulge in it, but to really feel it. And, like I said, to really do that shadow work and then transmute it in the alchemical fire to ultimately establish 0-point non-reactive consciousness, right? Which is not this dissociated intellectual state where you're just aloof to thing, but embodied and grounded in just with your, energetic auric boundaries, and you don't react. You come more from a place of responding, right? Which again ties to the marriage of the inner male and female. So in the end of it all there's are lessons. That's really, for me, my quote-unquote philosophy, what I see, all there's are lessons, right? In terms, it's just, we don't get to move on until we have learned a lesson, right? We're now in 3D with possibility to move up to 4D, but in third grade, you don't get to fourth grade until you have learned your third grade lessons. And these lessons are, again, different for each of us, and they're unique, tuned to our own personal soul evolution, based on our ancestral stuff, genetics, karma, past lives, and all kinds of things, we are unconsciously not aware of. And all of this is coming up more and more, right? So the mother here again from Integral Yoga says this about the spiritual test. There's always a spiritual test before being able to attain the next stage of power. Each time you have to make progress, you have to undergo an examination. When divine manifestation takes place, they also have to go through great difficulties and suffering as a result of oppositions of dark anti-divine forces which have had a hold upon earth since the creation. Those dark powers always oppose the new lights because they do not want to give up their grip on the earth, and sometimes the hostility even takes the form of war on earth, created and initiated by occult hyperdimensional forces working through the human puppets. But in spite of all obstruction, the divine will succeeds at last, which is the good news, right? Which ties in saying everything will be fine. However, it's not meant to escape, to again, not to engage. We still have our individual roles to play, right? We know time is an illusion anyway. But there's something higher happening on the levels we have no idea of, especially if we're caught up into our own ego personality and how we think and try to analyze things. And that's also a trap I see, especially in this day and age of information overload and trying to understand things and figuring things out. You can get lost in the rabbit hole of trying to figure it out intellectually. You will never ever get it because there's always more, right? It's important to have a basic understanding, especially of the deeper levels of the matrix, but then it's all about you understand the modus operandi, and then you don't want to get caught up in it. You can also get caught up in shadow like uncovering and kind of like indulge in that, and then people get addicted to like just pointing all the out the shit in the world, so to speak, right? And then you stay on this frequency, or you take the New Age pill and then fall in the fallacy of denying evil, or that evil doesn't exist, and you just try to be positive, and let's get going. It doesn't work either, right? But we're in this time of transition, as I call it. There's a birth, right? And it takes time, and we have to just step up to the plate. We all, on some level, chose to be here, right? But birth, as some women know, is a painful and beautiful process at the same time. So the key in all of this is frequency and vibration, right? And I'm again not saying it from a New Age perspective, right? Which has kind of oversimplified this whole idea of raising your frequency and vibration and all of that. But I talk in terms of the alchemical esoteric process, where we do need to engage in the inner awakening process of deep shadow work, of clearing, of just, sometimes painful work to clear the vessel in order to anchor the higher frequencies, to become frequency anchors. And that's how we basically transcend the matrix, right? Where we not become subjected to these occult influences. And that's how we also really help the world and others in ways your mind cannot possibly comprehend, right? Your own awakening process in this deeper true meaning of the word in terms of embodiment and anchoring the divine love and divine will into your body as this ascension, as instrument for ascension, has way more profound effects than trying to wake up people by intellectual discourse alone, right? And that's actually ties also into what I mentioned before, into this quote-unquote secret of reality creation. So it's not about necessarily fighting the matrix, you know what I mean? But transcending it. It doesn't mean to ignore everything that's going on. It doesn't mean to be silent, but something else is needed, right? And essentially we're talking about enlightenment. That's really what it comes down to. What I see most often, especially in the truth movement, conspiracy movement, sometimes is left out for all the information, and especially within the truth movement, people fighting each other, and the cult of personalities are out there, and how a lot of, famous truth seekers out there are actually under the influence of occult forces they're not aware of, right? And supplying that loosh, right, with all the psyops and disruptions within that. But what's missing is why are we doing what we're doing, right? It really comes down to awakening, and ultimately we're talking about enlightenment beyond informational warfare. But enlightenment, as Adyashanti said and Max mentioned before, is a destructive process, right? It's not the thing of you just I'm peace and love and light and everything goes nice. That's not how it works, right? Because it always will, the ego slumber will react, and you will right away attract the hostile forces or attacks to you, which, then the New Age tells you, you've attracted this to you because of your negative thoughts and this and that. And that's perfect example how the matrix is influencing New Age, right? When you have struggle and you're being attacked, shows you actually on some level, you're on the right track, but you need to get through these test initiations, right? So to close this, I wanted to share a quote by Adyashanti, which really, I want to think you guys all, what is your intention in life? What do you really want? When I do retreats in Peru twice a day, which Benny was part of last November, and I do an exercise there as well when I have a workshop around aligning with your soul purpose and reality creation, and ask people what is your main aim, your intention in life, right? And I ask people around, and everybody has fulfillment, happiness, this, success, but hardly anyone actually mentions, I want to wake up, right? So how many of you, how us truly want to wake up and truly are willing to engage in that process, right? Because I feel it's beautiful how more and more people are awake in this day and age, but it somehow has become also a bit of a hype in some sense, You know what I mean? Like, I'm awake this and that and all of that. And lots of disinformation and emotional projections and wishful thinking. But enlightenment is a destructive process, right? It eradicates everything what you ever thought to be true, not only in the world, but within yourself. From an esoteric perspective, it's all about exposing lies, not on the outside, but from the deeper esoteric perspective, the most damaging lies are the lies we tell ourselves, and those are the hardest to detect, right? And then all the rationalizations come in and emotional projections and we most often are not able to see each other objectively. So we cannot also wake up on our own. We need others in the process who sometimes call us out on our shit, give us mirrors, still from a compassionate place, but still like we need to be able to take that in, right? And not support each other's delusions and lies. So for some food for thought, here's Ajay Shanti. The truth of the matter is that most people who say they want awakening don't actually want to awaken. They want their version of awakening. What they actually want is to be really happy in their dream state. And that's okay if that's as far as they've evolved. But the real sincere impulse towards enlightenment is something that goes far beyond desire to make our dream state better. It is an impulse that is willing to subject itself to whatever is needed in order to wake up. The authentic impulse towards enlightenment is that internal prayer asking for whatever it is that will bring us to a full awakening, no matter whatever turns out to be wonderful or terrible. It's an impulse that puts no condition on what we have to go through. This authentic impulse can be a bit frightening because when you feel it, you know it is real. When you have let go of all conditions, when you have let go of how you want your awakening to be and what you want the journey to be like, you have let go of your illusion of control. In my experience, everyone will say they want to discover the truth, right up until they realize that the truth will rob them of their deepest held ideas, beliefs, hopes, and dreams. The freedom of enlightenment means much more than the experience of love and peace. It means discovering a truth that will turn your view of self and life upside down. For one who is truly ready, this will be unimaginably liberating. But for one who is still clinging in any way, this will be extremely challenging indeed. How does one know if they are ready? One is ready when they're willing to be absolutely consumed, when they're willing to be a fuel for a fire without end. So he talks about the alchemical inner fire from the esoteric perspective, right? Of not avoidance and really feeling the friction within without projecting outwardly or buffering it up or blaming others or victimizing yourself. And what he writes at the end, that's what I see happening right now. I see the splitting happening. I see more and more people waking up, and it's more liberating as they engage in this process and shed and, go through a rebirth process. And I see a lot of more people, struggling even more, almost unnecessarily, because they're still clinging to the old life, to the desires, wants, dreams that are actually based on their false self or their conditioned desires or based on wounds and insecurity and whatnot. But right now in this, time of transition, there's this higher force, we're almost pushed, quote-unquote, forced towards awakening to make a choice. So more and more is coming up to be transmuted and transcended. That's why we see in the outside with the chaos is also a reflection of our inside, of our own discord, right? Even the climate, all the weather madness out there is not always just HARP or chemtrails or geoengineering or the global warming lie, but also a reflection of our internal state, because everything is connected and manifests in weather, even cataclysms, right? So what I see more now as a timeline reality split, because like I said, I don't see a collective awakening happening anytime soon. There are over 7 billion people on this planet. But what I see is like people like us, we start to create more own realities. We're being drawn together naturally, right? And building a new world of transcending the old. And the old needs to fucking die. I'm sorry, but you cannot fix it. Yeah. The system the system is not broken, right? People say fix the system, but the system is exactly doing what it's supposed to do, to keep us in this divide and conquer, ego, survival, fear-based frequency, right? So it's like, let it die. And we need to also die to our old self to really ascend. And I really love this picture because it shows, the beginning stage, or these our mechanical self, like Goethe said, we are machines, and we're so mechanical we're not even aware of. We dream to be awake, but when you engage in this deeper esoteric transformation of alchemical inner fusion, right, you reconnect to your original blueprint prior to genetic modification, and it reaches up into your multidimensional selves. You become a conscious transducer of the divine. The soul brings to forefront, right, and it ripples out into reality, and it has profound, again, I cannot overstate it, effects on reality, right, to help others as frequency anchors, right? And each of you have this cargo within your unique potential, your unique lesson and talent in what you can do, right? This is also the end of competition, of comparison. The moment you compete and compare yourself, the matrix has you, right? And this also means obviously establishing true self-love, right? But what self are we talking about? Are we talking about the conditioned, wounded self with all these desires, which are not really our own, or a true self, aligned with the divine and the higher self? So for me, these are intense times, right? But exciting times. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else right now, and I feel many of us have come here, incarnated consciously, to participate and step up, to the plate, so to speak. We're not here just for vacation, right? We need to engage in the process. It doesn't mean to deny, have fun, enjoy, and obviously reconnect with our inner child, and definitely be creative and all of that. But we are here to participate in this transformation in our own unique way, and we need to wake up, actually remember why we came here for. So the awakening process is more a process of remembering rather than learning something new. On a personal note, to end this with, like, for me, the more I've dug deeper into my own realization, the saying applies: the more I know, the less I know, in the sense, right? I get into states in my meditations, or then I tap in, and I'm like, I'm in awe, and it's just going to generate so much gratitude and humility, because I have so much respect for the mystery and the unknown, right? And developing just this deeper trust and letting go of the need to do, and just step back and really tune back into here and simplifying. And the more I do that, actually more things come to me, life response are being guided, and I don't even need to engage in any manifestation techniques, any of that, because the more you're aligned, everything that's truly on your soul path, what you truly need on a soul level, will come to you, right? And then, that path, again, is very unique and individual path for all of us, and that really needs to be honored and kept in mind, Thank you.